The Middle East is in turmoil again. Clashes have started once more between Iran and the United States. Now, it seems like the market doesn't react no matter what happens in the Middle East. Let's take a closer look at this today. Let's get right into it. The UK Maritime Trade Operations reported that on July 7th, an oil tanker moving south was hit by a projectile in the waters 15 kilometers off the coast of Lima, Oman, near the Strait of Hormuz. The vessel itself was hit. Fortunately, there were no casualties. The ship was registered in Qatar and was carrying LNG. Iranian state TV said the vessel was attacked after ignoring warnings from Iran and continuing to sail. Reuters also reported that a Saudi Arabian oil tanker was attacked while passing through the Strait of Hormuz near Oman. This vessel reportedly followed nearly the same route as the earlier attacked Qatari-flagged ship. With consecutive attacks occurring in similar locations, the shipping industry is paying attention to the possibility that these are not accidental incidents, but rather actions targeting specific routes. We need to examine why Iran continues these actions. Iranian military officials have repeatedly said all oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz must use approved routes, and they cannot ensure the safety of ships using unapproved routes. They also stated that ships disabling tracking devices or sailing without coordinating with Iran do so at their own risk. As a result, ships along Oman's coast are under intensive surveillance. The international community is concerned that a country unilaterally designating routes in international waters or using force to enforce them could threaten freedom of navigation. Amid these tensions, for ships passing through Hormuz, even choosing a route itself has become a new risk factor. After attacks on Qatari and Saudi ships, the US called it a ceasefire violation and launched strong airstrikes on Iran. On this day, US Central Command said in an X post that they launched powerful airstrikes to punish those responsible for attacking commercial vessels with civilians in international waters. They also emphasized that Iran's attacks are not only dangerous, but also a clear violation of the ceasefire. The MOU that the US and Iran were about to sign stated that free passage without tolls would be guaranteed for 60 days in the Strait of Hormuz, but Iran was the first to break this agreement. Because of this, the US launched a powerful airstrike. The US military used precision-guided weapons to strike over 80 targets, including Iran's anti-aircraft systems, command and control networks, coastal radar, and anti-ship missile bases. Around 60 small vessels belonging to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps were also attacked. Earlier, the US announced that it would abruptly end the sanctions waivers that had been applied to the sale of Iranian oil. This means the temporary measures allowed during US-Iran follow-up talks after last month's Memorandum of Understanding have now returned to their original state. The decision was made because Iran kept attacking merchant ships on international routes, so there was no reason to keep sanctions relief. With this measure, Iran's channels for selling crude oil on the international market have become significantly narrower again, and transactions using dollar payments have also been virtually blocked. The United States has not stopped at military action, but has expanded its pressure to the economic sector as well, sending a strong warning to Iran. In particular, attention is being drawn to the fact that this time, the airstrikes and the reinstatement of sanctions were announced at almost the same time. This is because they have raised the level of response by mobilizing both actual military force and financial sanctions at the same time, going beyond just diplomatic warnings. It is interpreted that the United States has sent a signal to the international community that if Iran continues to threaten international merchant ships in the Strait of Hormuz, it will not rule out additional economic sanctions and military action. This decision will likely increase pressure on future negotiations. Since the United States withdrew sanctions relief first, the hard-earned trust between both sides could be significantly shaken. Since Iran's expected oil export expansion for economic recovery is again blocked, Iran is now more likely to strongly oppose US actions. The United States hasn't fully ruled out negotiations, but this move shows it plans to negotiate from a position of strength. In response, Iran also appears to have taken immediate action, this time with signs of attacks targeting Bahrain and Kuwait being detected. Tensions across the Middle East have risen once again. When an attack seemed possible, both countries issued air raid warnings at nearly the same time and told residents to evacuate immediately to a safe location. In particular, Bahrain's Ministry of Interior announced through its official X account that sirens had sounded. They issued an emergency notice saying, "Citizens and residents, please remain calm and evacuate to the nearest safe location." The United States later said it believes Iranian forces launched drones toward Bahrain. The situation was similar in Kuwait as well. The Kuwaiti military announced its air defense network is responding to hostile missile and drone attacks, stating the system was activated immediately. The Army General Staff then urged citizens not to be alarmed even if they hear explosions, as these are most likely the sounds of intercepting enemy attacks, and asked them to follow the government's safety guidelines. Locals reported hearing several explosions as the air defense network operated non-stop. This alert is getting more attention as it happened just after the United States announced airstrikes on over 80 targets in response to Iran's attack on the Hormuz Strait. Shortly after the United States ended its large-scale operation, Iran appeared to take military action against neighboring countries, signaling rapidly escalating conflict. There's another noteworthy point. The ceasefire between the United States and Iran is once again coming under strain, and in such situations, it's common for the international financial markets to be greatly affected. However, the current market response is calmer than expected. In the past, whenever military tensions rose in the Middle East, investors worried about the possibility of a large-scale escalation. However, as time went on and cases where conflicts were managed at a certain level kept repeating, the way the market responds has also changed. International oil prices are also under upward pressure, but unlike in the past, we haven't seen a surge up to $100 yet. While there are some stocks in the global stock market experiencing sharp fluctuations, it doesn't seem to be because of the Middle East conflict. Investors are closely monitoring the situation, but for now, it seems that both the US and Iran are more likely to continue with limited military responses rather than risk a full-scale war. The market appears to reflect this view, maintaining a cautious wait-and-see approach instead of excessive fear. The main reason why the energy market is not being shaken significantly is because the supply of crude oil is still continuing normally. The Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant portion of the world's crude oil passes, has not been completely blocked, and the exports from major oil-producing countries are also continuing. Although some ships are rerouting or strengthening safety measures, there has not yet been a shock severe enough to halt the supply of crude oil and LNG. The international raw materials market is watching future military developments instead of immediately fearing supply shortages. However, it's hard to say that this situation will continue. If attacks continue in the Hormuz Strait or tanker and LNG carrier operations face major disruptions, the situation could change instantly. It's also important to note that the market appears calm, not because the risks have disappeared, but because it believes the worst-case scenario hasn't materialized yet. Due to ongoing Iranian military attacks in the Hormuz Strait, efforts to avoid the area are increasing. First of all, almost all Korean ships have left the Hormuz Strait. In particular, Saudi Arabia is considering expanding alternative routes along the western Red Sea coast to transport crude oil without passing through the Hormuz Strait. Saudi Arabia is currently discussing plans to expand the capacity of its east-west pipeline by up to 2 million barrels. This pipeline can transport up to 7 million barrels of crude oil daily. This would let Saudi Arabia and neighboring countries move more crude oil without using the Hormuz Strait. This can't be done immediately and will take time, but there's a movement to move away from the Hormuz Strait. Another key point is Israel's actions. Currently, Israel is not directly at the center of this conflict, but it has shown that it is closely monitoring the rising military tensions between the United States and Iran. If Iran extends its drone or ballistic missile attacks, or if groups like Hezbollah, the Houthi rebels, and pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria launch full-scale actions, it would be hard to rule out the possibility that Israel will respond militarily. Especially if Iran's air defense network and military facilities have been partially weakened by US airstrikes, there is also talk that Israel may see this as a strategic opportunity. Considering these points, if the conflict between the US and Iran continues, there is a strong possibility that Israel may expand its own independent military operations. If that happens, the conflict could expand from a US-Iran issue to a multilateral military clash involving Israel. Above all, the current Israeli government is maintaining a very hardline stance on security issues, and with a general election coming up soon, they will not want to miss this opportunity. For Prime Minister Netanyahu, this is even more the case.